color.
I know,
Yeah,
the difference in all
It's
the
so cool. The
colors.
table even has the piece. It looks like it's
Yeah, it's a
moving.
very
It's so
intricate
cool.
one.
They have a website you can go on and like do, like you have like thousands of different ways you can design like figures. You have,
Yeah.
like different colors and different. You want big ears, you want
So
small ears, and it's just amazing.
So cool.
I want to play with
No,
it.
you're fine. I was waiting for it.
I have to lean back. I
He
gotta
saw the
sit-
hammer in my hand, and he said, uh-oh, it's coming. All right, so I'm gonna hit this once and say this meeting will now be called to order. As you are able and willing, please rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, thank you all for coming. First order of business is our public comment period. We have had no one ask to deliver public comment, so we'll move directly into the report of the secretary. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, August 24th?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, August 24th, 2022.
Second, Heather?
Thank you, Heather. These are, of course, the minutes that we looked at last time and decided not to approve because they needed a little work. So,
Yes.
anybody have comments or questions?
I just found just a couple more things, not anything major. Page two, number 2 at the bottom, third row down. Examples would be to set up directions for. So instead of the comma, would be to, I think is that what that's supposed to say.
That was better, I agree.
And then on page 3, oh gosh, how do I describe? So about halfway down, but in that first very long paragraph, over to the right, there's a sentence that starts with Mr. So just before that, I think that we just need to, that sentence that says, he stated that having that difficult discussion with our staff, really becoming more aware of what those great Tier 1 supports are, what we can do, and what it looks like in the various classrooms will be a priority, I think needs to be added in order for that sentence to make sense.
In order for it to be a sentence.
Yes, exactly. Will be a priority, just needs to be added. Okay. And then number 3, remote participation. Let's see. I think, so halfway down in that paragraph, there's a sentence that starts with, that does not mean to just watch the meeting, but to have the ability to have active participation, period. And then scratch out, there are 3 things that have to be met. We already said that. And then 1, comma, we need to have a policy. So just end the sentence at participation and then cross off the rest of that.
So get rid of there are 3 things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because we already said it,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
in
just
the
kind,
previous
and
sentence.
it makes
Yeah.
the sentence just doesn't really work.
Yep.
And then on page 4, towards the bottom, the paragraph before number 6, Mrs. Early Hersey provided details. I think that second sentence, this included kindness, safety, and civility, and academic and behavioral success. I think those are 2 different things and not all one thing. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so instead of the comma, and. And then the very last sentence of that page, once finalized, he will put together a schedule for the year. So we're just missing he will. And then on page 5, very last sentence, this legally allows us to record any incidents of people calling. So if is missing, so if there is ever a crisis incident,
Yeah.
cross off so that if there is ever a crisis incident, we would be able to pull the call. So just cross off so that.
Yep.
Makes sense.
That's it for that.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I think one of the things, Elaine, I'm gonna try to make your world a whole lot easier. Can you see me? Oh,
She's over there today.
Where is she?
Let's go back to more generalized minutes. we're getting lengthy again, and just as these meetings are getting longer, I think we really wanted more succinct, because this just becomes a
Absolutely.
huge laborious
Yeah.
activity. We have 2-hour meetings, so I think more the kind of the main idea outlining those types of things. Let's consolidate this a little bit more, because I think it's, they're great, but I think at the same time, I think we just, for your own sanity, I think we want to make it a little bit more concise. We don't need the running dialogue.
Paraphrasing is okay, just, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even summarizing.
Summarizing.
Summarizing,
Yeah.
We
yeah.
had a discussion on this topic, main point was this.
That's what was decided, yeah.
Yep.
Don't have to be a transcript by any means.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll be easier, I think.
Any other comments or questions about that one? All in favor? I see 6 hands up, that is 6-0, thank you. And now please a motion on the minutes of our last meeting on the 7th of September.
I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, September 7th, 2022.
I'll second Kate.
Keith, thank you. Okay, comments or questions on this one?
Not much here at all that I could find. Page 3, second paragraph, Mr. Hugter reported that, I think that setup just needs to have a space, set up. It's 2 words.
Yeah.
And then, a couple lines down, he said the staff also had conversations, blah, 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 blah. Then it should be a comma, 1 being a success center to help students, because we can't have that be a sentence by itself. So I think it just comma after year instead of a period.
And lowercase o for 1.
And lowercase o, yeah.
Makes sense.
And then on number 3 at the bottom, between Elliott and South Berwick, that's a colon instead of a question mark. And then number 6 on page 4, very first line, Mr. Coverley asked the school board if they, instead of the.
Yep.
Page 5, number 8, 4th line up from the bottom of number 8. I think exemplar should be example. Maine even asked to use their grant application as an example in the future, which is a credit to how hard they worked on it. That's it.
You did some more homework this week, didn't you?
No, I came early. I came early and did it. It's the only way it gets done.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Also 6-0, thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to the report of the chair. First, an update. I think those of you who are able to have indicated your interest in going to the fall conference.
Well,
the
I was just
MSMA.
wondering if there's a carpool going
Yes.
on, because I'd like to go, but it is really far away.
So why don't we get the schedule to find out, because I think it's the Friday that we go. I think Thursday's typically the business meeting, and then Friday's kind of more of the exhibitors and the sessions. And so once we get the schedule, but absolutely, we should get together and we typically just carpool up to Augusta. It's a lot easier. So. If I
Because
drive,
of-
I'll even pay my drive.
Because of my role in the MSBA, I'm going to be up there the whole time,
Yeah.
so I have to stay up there, so.
Okay, so just the two folks in 3
Yeah.
and 4.
Did Thursday look like the better day?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Thursdays.
I think if you look,
Yeah.
I honestly have no
they
idea what the
changed it up
schedule is,
this
so-
year, I think.
They
Yeah.
have sessions over both days, but
Majority are on, and the keynote is on
keynote is
Thursday.
Is it on Thursday?
Mhm.
yeah,
Yes.
might be the
Okay.
better day.
Yep, perfect.
Good.
Thursday sounds good.
Excellent. Okay, second, I promised John an MSBA update the last meeting, specifically, and I did send out a note to you folks around the resolutions that will be voted on at the delegate assembly, which is
Mhm.
taking place on Saturday, the 22nd. And as we agreed in the last meeting, I'm going to be the delegate for this school board. So I will be attending that Saturday, the 22nd meeting. It's a remote meeting. I don't have to go up to Augusta for that one, to vote on these resolutions. I've read through them and am inclined to vote in favor of all of the proposed resolutions. I wanted to hear from all of you if you had any thoughts or concerns about any of them.
I did have a chance to look over those today,
Okay.
actually,
Yeah.
and I was really excited about some of them. Like,
Yeah.
they're
Mhm.
really good updates,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I didn't have any concerns at all. In
Yep.
fact, it seemed like they were necessary.
Awesome. It's interesting to me that some of these resolutions that they're proposing to change some of the language on go back to as early as like 1991, when they were first passed by the
Mm.
MSBA. So it's just ongoing advice that the MSBA, MSMA really gives to the legislature as they ask for it. So, good, okay.
Good
Everybody's
stuff.
cool? Then I will
Yep.
vote in
Yes.
favor of those. Thank you very much, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, the MSBA is planning to roll out new school board member training in November. So, it looks like since I'm the only one on the ballot in November, there won't be a new school board person from South Berwick in November unless there's a late-breaking sort of fantastic write-in candidate, I don't know. But the new school board member training is also good as refresher for anybody who's feeling like they need it. Rebecca, I don't know how much
Yeah.
chance you had to do any of their training on how school boards operate and such.
Yeah, I mean, I looked over
Yeah,
the
okay.
training module,
Can I
For
offer
sure.
just a thought?
Yes, please.
but if there's an additional.
I think it's always good, in my opinion, to have Drummond and Woodson kind of come in and do an hour and a half,
Mhm.
just kind of like
Very
recap of like,
Mhm. I
hey,
love
let's
that.
remember this, there's some new things out there. And so typically we do that. I was waiting till after the election in November. That way we could do it, you know,
Yep.
maybe the beginning and the end of November, second meeting, maybe the beginning of December. We'll try to figure out time-wise with the other committees and things like that. But that was kind of where my head was when we had kind of talked about this earlier. I don't know if that still is the pleasure of the board.
Absolutely.
I'd
Yeah,
appreciate
it's
it.
very
absolutely.
helpful.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely,
They
yeah.
were
Okay, cool,
Yeah.
very good. Okay. Last thing I noted, in our last MSBA meeting, there is an active process ongoing right now across the state to update policy CBI, which we don't have, we don't use it here, but also to update in general the superintendent evaluation project.
Oh, that's
Oddly
so
enough.
funny.
Which we've just gone through that whole thing, so. Actually, on that topic, we need to get all of that information, or have you already reached out to Dan? Or was
I
I?
sent you an email with his information on it.
Okay, so I will get all of that information, thank you, I just wanted to make, I was confused about where we landed on that, so I will reach
I
out to
left it with him
Dan.
that you're gonna be reaching out to him.
Yep,
to
excellent.
share, because I don't have permissions.
Okay, so I will reach out to him.
So they have policy update recommendations for that
There's a policy called
specific?
CBI, it's an existing proposed policy, it's not a policy that our district has adopted.
Oh, okay.
Basically, it outlines superintendent evaluation to be transparent, is basically,
Oh,
is what it
okay.
does.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not every district in the state's the same, it's just more
Right.
so.
Yeah, no, in fact, I would venture to guess that every district in the state is different from every other one.
Yeah.
But there's a concerted effort going on now, and I will certainly, once we get this clear of the attorneys, that I will offer it to them as, here's what we did.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted Dan Rose to look at it, because there is the policy
Yes.
piece, you know, because
Yep.
there is information out there, so I just want to be.
Yep.
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
One last thing on my section, we attempted, I think, to have a town officials meeting on the 14th of September, did that happen, or?
Yes.
It did, okay, does
Yeah.
anybody want to give a real quick update on that? I was not able to
I
attend.
feel like I was there,
You were
but
there.
then I
You
got
were
cut
there.
out.
We had tech,
I know.
yes.
Then we had some tech issues.
Yeah, I can't comment on it because, yeah, I got
okay.
cut out.
Yep, so I will update and feel free to chime in if you have anything to add. So, the town manager from Elliott was unable to make it, so it was the, South Berwick representation was there. We just sort of went over the goals of the group, of why we have the town officials meeting, sharing information, cost sharing ideas such as the fuel sharing, and so just sort of shared the framework of the meetings and the agendas that will be taking turns, where the meetings are, who sets the agendas. Mr. Cavalier reviewed the enrollment data, just to bring South Berwick Town Manager up to speed there. Reminded him that Rollins for students are tuitioned in. Talked about the assessment breakdown of the tax dollars, similar to the presentation that we had last meeting, I believe it was.
Mhm.
Talked about some cost-sharing ideas. like I said, the fuel, reviewed the school budget and how that's built, just to sort of share some clarity around communication during our budget season and how the budget is built and how to most effectively and transparently share that information with the towns. Talked about the recent school resource officer at the high school. There's a new one, and also at the middle school. And just sort of talked about pulling in the town and the, did we talk about the police station, pulling the police station in?
Yeah, so
Possibly.
I had a meeting about 2 weeks ago now with the Southborough Police Department, with the SRO, to kind of say, hey, look, how do we handle these types of situations kind of more philosophically? And then we're going to do the same thing with the middle school. Chief Moya was not able to make it today, so we're postponed it, but we'll meet next week. But just, it's a good opportunity. We have 2 new SROs. Let's make sure we're on the same page. And really just part of that is what happens when a law is broken out on school property? How do we handle that? Whose decision is what? What's the expectation that we have? And just really trying to get some clarity around that and just some consistency, so.
And then Mr. Pellerin just updated some changes coming to South Berwick. They were updating their comprehensive plan, and there was a review of that in progress. There was the traffic study from 2010 that was also being reviewed, and they hired a full-time economic developer who will sort of help with all areas encompassing the comprehensive plan. They'll involve the district in the conversation with the traffic, especially at Central, that intersection at Central School. And the goal is to sort of fix the traffic so that we can help grow new businesses. And also more mention of that light at 91 and 236 that is scheduled to be complete, I believe, in December of 2023.
That's correct.
So, and then also there's going to be more new businesses up at the Pumpkin Town, even up more, and that might warrant another traffic study. Remember the last one failed, so if there's more business up there, it could potentially warrant another traffic study that might hopefully get a light considered there. And that was it.
I think the 91-236 is actually preliminary works beginning in October.
Okay.
So it's going to be kind of a longer process. They hope to have it all done before the start of school next year is kind of ideally, but just they're trying to work around our schedule as much as they can, because Tim was very clear that we just can't have buses sitting in
Right.
traffic from 6:30 to 8 o'clock every morning, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it will be great if we have, like, the officers at our town meetings with, you know, the board/town meetings that we have, because I was just thinking too that it's really nice when the South Berwick Police actually are out by the entryway of the high school on the days that they're not, you know, cars are zipping through, you know, and it's hard to get in and out, and you just worry about those young drivers, you know.
100%.
Yep.
So it'd be nice to remind every once in a while.
Yep.
May I just comment on what Heather just said?
Yes.
Are you okay?
Of course.
So one of the fascinating things about schools is the safety zone lighting. And so in many ways, we don't have controls over that. There are certain limitations that are set. And so last week, there was work being done. Somehow a wire was hit, so a short was created. So the safety lighting was going off for literally 3 days straight, and we could not turn it off.
Oh.
It wasn't us that did it. It wasn't
No.
electric light. It was just some of the work that was going on across the street. So we try to program those periodically. Those things become issues. Lightning storms, the power outages, those types of things cause it. It's fairly expensive to have people come and turn the lights on for us. We don't have the control, we can go do it ourselves. It's a very unique relationship. So we are aware of it. I just want to make sure the townspeople know that we are working on it. One of my fears, though, is what happened last week is that you have those lights running for 36 hours straight, or whatever it is, 72 hours straight. And people are going to start to ignore those
Yep.
lighting.
Mhm.
And that's my biggest concern.
Mm.
Obviously, I don't want to slow down traffic. That's not the intent, and we don't want to have those on. But at the same time, those are there for safety for students, and make sure students and families are safe.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
just something that I wanted to make you all aware of, that we are aware of.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
That concludes my report and brings us to yours.
I just have. Okay, well, thank you very much. I have included in your packet kind of a draft calendar of taking the feedback that was provided by the board and kind of the different presentations that people wanted to see. I might have changed the framing, just trying to incorporate a couple of things at one time when it was being presented, but for example, there was a question that was raised about special education and just kind of how that process works, and so we put that on the schedule for tonight. Section 504 wasn't mentioned directly, but just as, those sometimes go hand in hand, and so I took the liberty of just putting that on there. That might just be good for people to understand what that is, and they're kind of two different paths that have been created, and just, those are the types of questions that you might get when you're at a soccer game, or something. People are like, hey, I've got a question about this, and this might give you some information. You know, some questions were talked about, you know, kind of the Elliott Central relationship, and that's the collaborative work. So we're doing a ton of work around, you know, getting those schools together for the first time, having conversations across all grade levels, and I want to share that work that we're doing. Safe learning environment was something that we talked about, and I didn't want to say anti-bullying, because I feel like that's a negative connotation. This is about all students being safe, and anti-bullying is some of the ways that we do that, and so that's kind of what the big idea is. And also part of that is how are we as schools pulling parents in. That's a really important part, of having parents join that conversation. And so that's one of the initiatives that we'll present on. Recycling, we talked a little bit about, but we'll have an update at that point in time. The school counseling program update, and so there's a few things kind of going on with that. I want to share the work that we're doing, and as well as kind of come back to the plan as far as we did this real big audit last year. Where are we right now with that? How's that going? The emotional learning presentations, I really wanted to bring the school counselors in and say, look, we talked about emojis, and you know, really this is kind of these you know, 8 to 12 lessons that are being done. What did it look like? How did it go? What are the feedback? What are we learning from that? We went to the grant presentation from the Great Works School. The extended learning opportunities, and what I wanted to tie this to, if it's okay with all of you, is that as a board last year, you put a priority on, we want to provide more opportunities through busing. And you said, you know, we're going to put X number of dollars. I think we put in like something like $9 per student more for every school to be able to have these opportunities. How are the schools using those? And so this is an opportunity. Let's talk about that resource that's out there, and what are we doing to enhance the student experience? And so that's when I just so I want you to know how I phrased it. That's where my mind was. And that about does it. The big other pieces, poor Linda has asked for 2 years now, and so Linda, I have you tentatively on the schedule for October 5th, once with the board approval, to present an adult education, and so that's something that we wanted to do. The other thing is the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey results are back, so it's been 2 years, and so the feedback that I received from the board 2 years ago was the first time we ever took that data and presented it to the board, and we talked about what it meant rather than just kind of having it in schools looking at it. I wanted to share it with the board.
Yes.
I asked Sally today and said, look, if Sally, I'm meeting with the board this evening, if the board approves, would you like to have, or would you take the opportunity to come in and present the information to us? She was 100% on board with that. If that's okay with all of you, I would like to put that on as a future presentation.
I can't imagine saying no.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other one that kind of came up is talking about like the U.S. News and World Reports stuff, and that's a little bit of a different conversation. So we've met a couple of times just trying to understand what rubrics or what metrics are being used to determine that, and then also kind of where we are. The metrics of what was used this past year, it was very interesting because it said it was based on the 2019-2020 school year, but the assessment data that they used was for the 3 previous years averaged together. So you're having data going back to basically 2016. And so it just, you know, so it's going to be interesting over the next 3 years. How do you manage the gap that was around kind of the state testing and where we are with that? And so we are also doing a ton of work around the NWEA, which is kind of the new assessment system, and trying to figure out, you know, taking that data and now how do we apply that to classroom instruction? So there's a lot of work that we're doing around that. So that may be something that we talk about if the board's willing later. I know there's going to be other stuff that comes up, but I just want to make sure that I hit the kind of the big points that all of you have brought up.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Is there
Yep.
anything that glaring that I missed? Which
I think
Look to me.
so.
Yeah,
So
I think you're
far,
good.
it's great.
okay, perfect. Oh, I'm sorry. The one other one is just I just thought this was really important. So as an instructional leader, how I use my time reflects on what I value. And so if we, when we meet, talk about student voice, and the board says the student voice is important, I wanted to pull in the student government to say, how are things going? What are you talking about? What are issues that are out there? And so give those students an opportunity to come forward and talk to the board. Like, let's, to me, that's an opportunity where we can empower students to be involved in the process. And so that was something that we have kind of, I didn't necessarily, wasn't a list. You said, let's have student government present, but the student voice always seems to be kind of this thematic piece. And so I added that to the agenda, looking for like that second week in November, third week in November, pardon me,
Yes.
if that's okay with everybody else. That is a little bit different, but I'm just trying to take the things that we've talked about over the last 6 months or a year or so. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
What will that really, will there be particular questions? Like, what will the topic of that be?
I
Will
think-
they be able to just come and just share what they think we need to know?
I think
Or,
when I met with Brett, we talked about it last week, and I think the idea would be like, what are your big initiatives for the year?
Yeah.
So here's where we are. Like, what do the committees look like? Like, what is the work? You know, where is, years ago, the Wellness Day was a big day, and like,
Yeah.
where is that now? What are the subcommittees? What are the policy committees? Those types of things. And so Brett's already met with them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I met with them this week, and we talked about some structure changes and inviting a representative from every advisory group to meet with them, which would up their membership from, say, 22, 23, up to almost 70. And then they talked about some initiatives they were interested in, and I talked about a couple things I wanted them to look into, so it was a very productive meeting.
So kind of sharing those big ideas. I just think,
Yeah.
and I think
awesome.
for a high school student, what are some real issues that the people want to talk about? And like,
Right.
let's give them the opportunity to say, look, this is, and look, the answer always can't be yes, right? Like, but like, let's at least go through the process, and if it's not yes, then let's talk about, is there a way that we can accommodate what they're really asking for? Or if it's not, let's explain how come we can't, like, this is a teachable moment, and that's really what
Yeah.
we're trying to find. And so I
Awesome.
think this gives a chance to validate some students who puts a lot of work and thought into things.
That's great.
Thank you.
Is that
I'm
okay?
glad- And I'm glad the group is expanded, like
Yeah.
with,
That's fantastic.
from all groups. That's great.
To get a voice from every
Yeah.
Right.
advisory, they can take that
That's
back
perfect.
to their advisory and have more discussion.
Yes,
And build
exactly.
that advisory program.
More
to-
collaboration,
Yep.
more,
Yes.
yeah,
Love it.
love that.
Awesome. So
Great.
if there's anything else, certainly let me know. I know there will be things along the way that there'll be
Sure.
questions about, but this is kind of just our draft, and I will share this with my administrative team on Monday, just to kind of say, hey, let's just start planning ahead. And just in case, we don't say it, but it's kind of the format that we've always used, but I just to formalize it. Typically with the administrators, I ask the elementary school administrators to be here the first meeting of the month. I ask the secondary administrators to be here the second meeting of the month. And so that's kind of the pattern that we've always followed. And obviously, there's 4 or 5 meetings where I say we need to have all hands on deck. The first meeting of the year, first day of school, whenever we do a budget presentation, is critical. When we have the district budget meeting, it's critical. When we have the retirees, it's critical. It's like those, like there are certain times when we say everybody needs to be here. But just so you know, so when I build the schedule, I try to align it so when people are here.
makes
So
sense.
that's why there's a little bit of a pattern if you see it. So
Makes sense.
just so you're aware.
So organized.
Flu clinics, interesting conversation this year. It's been a little bit different. I think that, the partner that we've had, and I'm drawing a blank right now, it's, oh my gosh. Northern Light has been a really good partner when it comes to the flu clinics in the past. We've had some different experiences when we did some of the COVID vaccination clinics. I think that put people back on their heels a little bit. I think having the 2 vaccinations is a much different scenario than just doing a one single time of vaccination. So we weren't sure what the numbers were going to be. We also had kind of received some feedback from the elementary schools that parents really wanted the opportunity to be there with the young children when they got vaccinated. And so how do you take that conversation and balance it with the equitability piece? Because the easy answer is like, we're not going to do it, we're not going to get involved in it, people can go to the doctors. But then from the, there's some bias that's built into that people all don't have the same access to that same type of service. And so we want to be able to be a good partner and make sure our goal is to get kids in school and keep them healthy, right? And so how do we do that? And so what we decided is that we were going to have a clinic at the high school yesterday for about 2 hours. We're going to have a clinic at the middle school for a couple hours yesterday, and then we had a clinic today at the Great Works School starting at 3 o'clock. So 3 o'clock is kind of an important number because it's just before dismissal, so if kids wanted to get vaccinated, they could come down before they get on the bus. But if parents wanted to come after work, they still have the opportunity to come from 3 to 5:30, and so we tried to adjust that. So it's a little bit different dynamic. Numbers were down a little bit from when we've been in years past. I'm not sure the rationale for that, but just so you're aware, but we did, today looked like it was a pretty good start when I was there at 3. So, but, we are still involved with it, but, it is it's kind of an ongoing, growing process that we're trying to be able to kind of customize for whatever, to offer it. But at the same time, if we also don't want to disrupt the entire school day on top of that. So there's a balancing act there, so.
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay. So as part of kind of our presentations, I had asked Scott to kind of do a presentation over special education and really kind of taking us from soup to nuts, because these are the types of questions where things kind of get lost and they're not sure how the process works. So our goal was to be able to say, in a big picture, this is what it is. If you're, there's kind of some tiers to it. This is what you need to do to be able to meet those needs. And so, Mr. Rooney, take it away.
Ready?
Yeah, I am.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come and teach you about special education. I don't want to say soup to nuts because it is complex.
Yep.
I'm going to give you an overview of a process. If you have questions, as usual, I think I've said, you can get those questions to me at the end.
Yep.
You can get them to me through the superintendent, and I can answer those questions at a later time or tonight if I know the answer off the top of my head. As usual with my presentations, they go through 3 different stages of editing, and there's always a typo, so I already know where it is.
Let's see who finds it.
But I will offer a prize in the future if you're able to identify where those are.
Challenge accepted.
If we look, I've titled it Special Education in the Marshwood School District, and they talk a lot about partnering with families. And the reason for that is families are the experts on their children, and we are the experts on education. So when we partner together and collaborate and cooperate, we probably get the best outcome for kids that we can. Advance to the next slide. So what is the purpose? There's a couple different pieces. To locate and identify students in our, I was at the microphone, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
To locate and identify students in our schools and within our district that have educational disabilities. This is called Child Find. Child Find applies to any school in the district, a private school, a public school, any school. So we have a responsibility to assist Berwick Academy or other schools in the identification of students with disabilities that attend their schools. And we set aside what's called the proportional share of the IDEA grant, the total population in the district minus the private school students, and then it comes up with a number, and then we multiply that, but it's an equitable distribution formula. And we use that money to evaluate students with disabilities in your private institutions, okay? That's something a lot of people don't know, but we enjoy our relationships with our private schools within the 2 towns, and we meet with them quite often about some challenges that their students are having. The next step is to identify or not identify students as disabled that have been referred due to a suspected disability. So we go through a process I'll go through in a minute, and then we come to a decision-making process, and then that is the decision that stands unless we go to state complaint, which I'll go through in a minute. And then the third purpose is to develop an individual education program for each student that is reasonably calculated for the students to receive educational benefit. This is called FAPE, and before you ask, FAPE. FAPE stands for Free and Appropriate Public Education. This is the standard in Maine. Some states have used a maximize the potential model. Most states, including Maine, do not. It's what's appropriate, and it's what's free and available. So, appropriate is defined as an IEP that is reasonably calculated for the student to make progress or receive educational benefit. Public schools that are funded through public money, so public means schools that are funded through public money, including special purpose private schools. Those in the state of Maine, special purpose private schools are commonly referred to as out-of-district placements. So the process of referral. This can get a little confusing. Parents can refer a student to special education at any time. When that happens, the MTSS process needs to start simultaneously at the school while that referral is being processed, right? And then the MTSS data and the evaluative data come together at the eligibility meeting, and that data is used to make the decision on whether the student has an educational disability. Referrals by staff are accepted after the completion of the MTSS interventions, or the general education interventions. And that's actually codified in your policy IHBAA and IHBAAR. And if you want to look at those policies, you'll see the process that's outlined for referrals by staff. And then there's also this other thing called referrals by others. Referrals by others follow the same process as the staff process. So regardless of who refers, the MTSS team, multi-tiered systems of support interventions, must be initiated and maintained by general education until the eligibility meeting. So there's a clock that ticks. So once a referral is signed by me, a clock starts ticking. It's a 15-day clock for the district to respond to the referral. So there's two options. We can meet and talk about the referral, and we can come up with a plan in a meeting, or we can say, we're just going to do this on paper. Here's the evaluations we're going to recommend. Do you agree with that, Mrs. or Mrs. Parent? And if they do, then we can do it that way too. As soon as that consent to evaluate, that description of the assessments that we send is received, signed back in my office, that starts another 45 school day clock. And that 45 school day clock is for the evaluations to have been completed and the team to have met and made a determination. So I will say this, in slower times of the year, that clock will tick a little faster. But based on the amount of referrals that you have and are managed, we always try to get things done as soon as we can, but sometimes we are going to use that full 45 days if we have a heavy evaluation agenda. I already said this, but all school district evaluations must be completed and the teams need to have met to determine eligibility within 45 school days, unless the parent fails to produce the child for evaluation. That sounds really harsh, right? But that really says the kid was sick, the kid couldn't come to school, so it's a little, I mean, the actual situations are much gentler than what the law says.
Yeah.
So just keep that in your mind. And then in those cases, the timeline doesn't apply. Once we get the student back in and the parent back in, we start another timeline. So evaluations are selected by the district based on the suspected disability. There are 13 handicap conditions. I don't like that word, but that's what it's called. From speech and language to learning disabilities to emotional disturbance to other health impairment to orthopedic impairment to deaf and hard of hearing to purely deaf and to developmental delay and their traumatic brain injury, all those categories. So the evaluators in that meeting or else on paper pick what they think the assessments are that are going to give them the data they need to inform the team to make their decision, and then we proceed with those evaluations. Those evaluations generally almost always include the school psychologist, always include the special education teacher for an academic assessment, and then the related service providers, speech, OT, PT, a little less frequent, but they're there too. And sometimes we evaluate kids in all those areas and then come back together. So this is where we get into a little conflict sometimes because we use eligibility forms by law. And those eligibility forms are generated by the state, by the Maine Uniformed Special Education Rules, and we're held to those, and those forms are designed to help the team decide if a student actually has an educational disability or if it's something else that's impeding their progress. For a student, and I'm going to give you a real tangible example in a minute, there's a 3-pronged test. The student has a disability. That comes through the data or even a doctor's diagnosis, although a doctor's diagnosis does not guarantee an educational disability, that the disability adversely affects educational performance. And I'm not just talking about academic performance, I'm talking about communication, social, emotional performance, I'm talking about self-help skills, and there's one more that I'm not talking about right now because I forgot what it was. Oh, it's right down there. It's physical and cognitive. So lots of different ways to sort of demonstrate adverse effect. Sometimes, and I understand why, we're schools, right? We teach, right? Our primary focus is to teach academics. So some people think it's academic, but it isn't. It's all those other areas that you have to consider also. Once a student's determined to be eligible, that starts another clock, means the team needs to have an IEP in place within 30 days of eligibility. Generally, we do a two-step meeting if it's not complicated, and we do eligibility and the initial IEP right at that meeting and start those services as soon as the parent signs that initial IEP, if it's the first one, or if we get agreement in the meeting. Again, the initial IEP in the state of Maine needs to be signed off by the parent. After that, you just communicate what it's going to be and reach consensus. The initial IEP any IEP, but the initial IEP will generally contain special factors like behavior, sight and vision issues, any kind of special factor that's going to influence the IEP. Accommodations and modifications in the general curriculum, goals for the students that must be relevant and measurable, specialized instruction by frequency, that means 260 minutes a week, or 500 minutes a week, or once a day, or however it's written for the child. And then related services by frequency, again, speech, PT, OT, board certified behavior analyst, there could be many different ones. And then once a student clicks off into 8th grade or the age of 14, it creates another section in the IEP that is called the transition section. And that section is designed for a couple of reasons. The first is we want to know what the kid needs to do to graduate, right? We want to know what the course of study is in 9th grade and then in 10th grade, and and then the next year in 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. But we also want to know what are the functional goals for the student when they leave school. Now, this doesn't apply to all special education students, and that some have, but there are some really cognitively impaired kids that we need to take a look at. How are you going to live after school? What level of independence are you going to have? When are we going to get vocational rehabilitation involved? When are we going to get community supports involved? How are we going to help your family meet the goals for you? Ed tech support is very different in different places in different states. So in Maine, on the IEP, we refer to it as a grid page, and that basically says we're going to give specialized instruction for 260 minutes, yada, yada, and related service and all of that. But in Maine, the educational technician does not go on the grid page. It's not considered a special education service. It's considered a supplemental service. So when the IEP team is contemplating ed tech support, they need to consider evaluative and performance data in making this determination. The team has, and this is probably the most important bullet I have, the team has a tremendous responsibility of trying to figure out and considering the students' need for independence and their need for support, and that support from the technician needs to strike down the middle so we're not creating dependency. Right? But we're giving kids what they need so they can be successful. Those are tough, tough decisions and conversations to have.
Can you describe what an ed tech actually is? Like, what does it look like in their
In
normal
other states, it's
day-to-day?
called paraprofessionals.
Paraprofessionals, the
In
same
the state
thing,
of Maine,
right?
you have an Ed Tech 1 that has a high school diploma, and there's a certain set of activities they can do. They need to be under direct supervision of a teacher at all times. There's an Ed Tech 2 who can deliver instruction independently, but need to be under the indirect supervision. And then there's an Ed Tech 3 who actually can work independently under the teacher's indirect supervision. So, but Ed Techs have a really diverse job,
Yeah.
right? I mean, some could be helping with like reading fluency. Others may be helping with hygiene or care or mobility. Or it really depends on the individual student.
So particular ed techs or paraprofessionals, whatever we want to call it, they're assigned particular students, right? Or do they stay in a classroom and then as students come through, they're?
It depends on the level of need. So you basically have one-to-one ed techs where a student has such a level of need that they need an adult with them, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they need an adult with them all the time. In fact, I really like it when maybe they're not with an adult at lunch, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe they can be independent at recess, or maybe they can be independent in social studies, or maybe somebody can be independent in phys ed. So the one-on-ones we try to, fade for independence. And then there's group support. So you might have students in a grade who, let's say there's 12 special education students in a certain grade, and 4 of them have shared technician support. So then what happens is the ed tech attends those classes with those students and gives them the support that they need based on their IEP.
Thank you for
Does that
that.
help?
Yeah, no, it does, and I kind of knew that, but I
Yeah,
wondered if
I mean,
maybe some other
You know,
school board
and the great
members
thing
were-
is sometimes it's okay to feed me softball questions because
Yeah.
it gives me the opportunity to tell the community.
Scott,
right?
I think the other
Yeah.
important part is when you talk about educational technician support, going to those meetings, you always, not always, often you'll have the argument, you know, a child would do better with this support, right? And, you know,
Mhm.
and the reality is who wouldn't do better if
Right.
someone was with you all day long,
Yeah,
right? Like
right,
that,
right,
so
right.
like, so, and so that, you know, that least restrictive environment piece, I'm sure Scott will cover in a second, is really, really important. And so you're balancing that conversation around, you know, what does the child really need, not what would they do better with, and that's that potential piece that sometimes people go into special education meetings and say, but they're not they're not meeting their full potential as learners,
Right.
and that's a different standard
Yeah.
than what Scott was describing. So that, you know, that is kind of that
Right.
sticky wicket that you try to, you know,
Yeah.
try to
Yes,
walk.
yes.
And that's all true and accurate, and it happens in meetings, but again, the most important piece for me is, did you have the conversation about what a kid needs to be independent and what they need for support? And John's right. Everybody does well in small group. Everybody does better in small group. Everybody does better with extra adult attention. But there's consequences to that. So,
Can I have a quick question?
Sure.
In the state of Maine, what is the ratio of special education students to regular ed students per adult in a classroom? Like, is it like, can you know, go
You
over
can't really- you can't-
75% or?
the issue is that you're dealing with individual students with individual needs. So there probably is not that metric. There is a metric that says X number percentage of my special education you know, I can give you a percentage of special education students by district, right? Like 15% is usually
Right,
around
no,
the
but
number
like in a
that's the state average.
classroom, like a regular ed class, because you want least restrictive environment, so,
So I think for
Right.
support, the answer would be is that for an educational technician is 5-to-1.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
if that child needs direct support, so you could have students that are special education who may not, that IEP may not even apply
Yeah.
to that
Yeah.
particular
Yeah,
class,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or their skill set. But from an ed tech support position, 5-to-1 is the ratio. If I'm a special education teacher and I'm teaching in the resource room, kind of a pull-out model,
Mhm.
that's 8-to-1.
8-to-1.
And then if you throw if you add more kids to that 8-to-1 and put a technician in the room, then it's 12-to-1.
right,
Right.
12 to 1. Oh,
So,
okay.
Heather, we're not going to be able to get like, you know, the overall ratio, but
No, I was just
there are
wondering.
rules that help guide that.
Right, yeah, I wasn't sure
Right.
what it was in Maine,
Yeah.
because, I mean, 12 kids out of 20 with IEPs in one classroom seems like that would be a lot, like, you know, so I'm assuming that you spread,
Right, but not
Between
all
all the
kids on
classroom.
IEPs
Right.
need educational technician support.
But that is one of the
So-
factors, when,
Right.
like at the middle school, we make teams. We want to
Yeah.
try to create two
Right.
equitable teams, you know, and so that we can really give those students the individual need that they have. And so to have 12 students who maybe have needs in that
Like
class who don't
sprinkle.
require support,
Right,
that would be a lot for one teacher to manage in a
Mhm.
given class.
Yeah.
And so we try to be able to balance that out for the
Yeah, but
best
try to be a
instruction.
little
Mhm.
creative, like, I've got a student with a one-on-one, and then I have students that don't have support. Can I get them in the same group and then put the other kids with the support in the group, so we sort of make things a little bit more
Mhm.
distributed?
Yeah.
So, does that, and that is a target, and we do our best to hit that target.
Right.
But sometimes you
You can't.
have a constellation that you just
Mhm.
can't pull apart.
And so the needs of the students are really gonna dictate how many ed techs, what type of ed techs, what's the distribution of ed techs in various areas of schools.
Oh,
and
yeah, during
classrooms.
budget season,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So we sit down, this is a great process.
Yeah.
We sit down and I know how many technicians are here and how many are there and how many are there. And then we look through the IEPs, moving up and try to shift and move, like we had to
Right.
move some people that, yeah. And then that happens when? In the spring, and then in September, it could look totally different.
Yeah.
So.
Right, so that's
So-
always a trick.
And I also think it's important to note that, like, and that's one of the tricky parts with the transition to the high school. And so where you go from having kind of this more heterogeneous grouping, you know, in a social studies class, to now you offer a CP and an honors, or you offer a CP honors and an AP, like, so they're, as you start to separate students by, you know, the kind of those course loads and those expectations, that does impact that as you create a master schedule, so you're constantly working on that
Yeah.
balance.
I'm just curious,
Sure.
what is the percentage of our district students who actually have an IEP?
You have 315 out of 2,100.
350 out of 20, 315 out of 2,100.
It fluctuates between 12 and 18% every
Okay.
year. The state
And you said
average-
the average is about 15.
State average is about 15%.
So we're kind of in there, give or take each year.
Yeah, some years you're like a couple points on. This last year, I think the averages when they count.
That was-
Yeah,
that would
sorry,
be
away
s-
from the microphone again.
That would be
I think when they
statewide.
calculate the averages statewide this year, those numbers are gonna go up based on just what we experienced.
So and that's part of the challenge that we have as any school does with when during a pandemic, is there an instructional gap or is it a skills gap? And that's what Scott
Right.
talks about, trying to determine if it's other factors, if it has, you know, they haven't been in school and so they've missed instruction and
Right.
therefore that impacts their achievement testing, of trying to disaggregate that. So that's why those 3 tests are so important. And that's one of the challenges of the pandemic, is that you have kids coming back, some kids were homeschooled, some kids were remote, other kids, you know, so you have all these kind of combinations coming back, and so that uniform instruction piece is a little bit like askew. You know, we're coming back to that, but that is one of the challenges.
Yeah, and I think you probably saw that on the news last week, right? The NAEP report came out, and our performance nationwide in reading dropped.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So those individually normed achievement tests are based on national norms. Well, they're just being normed now for what happened in the past 3 years.
Right.
Right.
So those norms, so we're giving assessments that have a normative standard that probably isn't typical to what kids are performing right now. And then you have those discussions in the IEP team, and I've said to John, it's almost like a circular argument. Like, is it the pandemic? Is it a disability? Did the pandemic cause a disability? I mean, it's really, really tough and confusing, and I think that's why you saw our numbers rise. Because they, you know, what, probably 30 kids from from last year to this year, and, you know,
Maybe close
my
to 40.
philosophy is
We
let's
were
get our hands on them
278, I think, last year.
and fix everything, and then maybe next year it'll be a little better, right?
Right.
So,
What percent do you sunset? Like what percent do you like just kind of move off of the IEP at a certain point because they've met their
every 3 years, a student needs to be reevaluated for eligibility, right? You see a lot more, and I don't want anybody to get nervous about, you see a lot more discharges when kids are older.
Yeah.
Because they've matured or they've developed strategies. I will let you know that I do track discharge data, and I take all the kids that are discharged at the end of the year, and I pull all their report cards to make sure that we did the right thing.
But they might still have 504 plans, so are you going to cover that? as
I'm not
well?
going to cover that today because I
Okay.
want to keep those two things relatively separate.
Oh, you have that on here, coming
Yeah.
up for conversation
Yeah.
for a reason.
I knew we were gonna lead to that, that's why we're gonna put it down.
Here we
just-
go.
Flat. If you hit me with that question at the end, I will explain.
Okay,
Okay?
that, yeah,
So if you say something like, what's the difference between a 5 and just do that?
yeah, yeah.
All right.
I,
So decision-making by the IEP team. People often think that in my position I have magical powers, and I don't. All decision-making is done through the IEP team, unless they can't reach consensus. So, and consensus doesn't mean we completely agree, it means I can live with it, right?
Yeah.
So if we reach consensus at the table, we're good. If we don't, and it doesn't happen very often, and usually I order the team to meet again before you do it, then the decision goes to me. And so then I need to issue that decision in writing to the parent. I would much rather have things worked out in the team setting. So often I will direct the team to meet.
I'm
And then
sorry,
will
did
let
I
them.
miss who's on the IEP team? That doesn't include the parents?
Yes, it does.
Okay, all right.
Parent is always part of the IEP.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought you said.
Yeah, always.
Does it ever include the student?
Yeah, as we get older, definitely.
Yeah.
You have an 8th grade student, it actually really is a pretty hot ticket in
Mm.
special ed moving up, and that student attended and ran their IEP meeting.
Great.
Oh, cool.
And that's what we like to see. Can't do it for everybody.
Yeah,
No.
right.
But when you get the model that's gonna help thread it, you use it, and
Awesome.
these students was and did a tremendous job.
And that's one of those pinnacle moments for parents as well,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, you go from that mother duck role to be, you know,
Empowerment.
protect, but then all of a sudden, you know, we'll have the conversation, is it appropriate for your child to be at the meeting? And some people are like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. Other people are like, absolutely not. And then they kind of come back to you and say, you know, I thought about that. Maybe this is a good thing for them to be able to have an active role in this. So it is kind of that, was one of those kind of rite of passage, so to speak, as kind of kids transition.
And we start that like 14, 15, 16,
Yeah.
but guess what? At the age of 17, I issue a letter that says, hey, next year, you're gonna be an adult.
Right.
And these decisions are yours with your parents' help, hopefully. all.
Yeah.
And the students, we cross their fingers, will come to their meetings, and if their parents do, that's fine too, but the student is going to make the decision.
Thank you.
It happens. So IDEA, which is the Individual with Disabilities Act, creates a block grant called the IDEA grant. That's pretty good. So that block of money is sent to your state. For your state to take that money and use it for the DOE and the Office of Special Services, and for them to give us money, there needs to be some things in place at the state level. One of the things, probably the most important thing that needs to be in place, is a complaint system. So if a parent has a complaint about the identification, evaluations, or programming of a student, I always try to get them to come and talk to me first. We try to address those concerns within the district. But if the parent's not happy with that, or the district in certain cases, then either the district will file for hearing with the state, or the parent will file for hearing for the state.
Is that your?
We have not had to do that in 3 years, and that feels pretty good. But it's come close.
Okay, did you have a question?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's two. They can call the complaint and file a complaint that's relatively an easy process. A hearing officer investigates. They get our side of the story, their side of the story. They make a decision and say, "Hey, next time you're going to do this. That's corrective action," or nothing. Right? That's like the more simpler, less costly process. And then there's the full due process complaint, which is a quasi-court hearing in front of a hearing officer, and that decision, unless you mediate or do other things, that decision binds. And then there's the appeal process. So it can go from the hearing office to the district court to the Court of Appeals to the ultimate Supreme Court, which doesn't happen very often. But those are where those can be very costly. And so for me, in this slide, the second bullet's the most important, is like, come talk to me and let's figure this out. Because I don't want, they're going to spend their household funds and we're going to spend our district funds, and can we do this another way? So, and that's it. So, I know there's questions. Do you have a question?
I think we actually have this coming up as a topic, so I don't
I can give
want
you
you
a
to
general-
feel too much, like obligated to
I
that.
give you a general frame.
Okay.
They are not connected processes,
Mhm.
right? There's different criteria, right?
Right.
So I went over 3-pronged criteria for IDEA that had to do, has a disability, needs specialized instruction, needs a cue to get back in front of the microphone. So that's sort of like the prong for the 3-prong for special ed. 504s are different.
Yeah.
It's that they have a condition or disability, that they're regarded as having that, and by nature of that, need reasonable accommodations to access the curriculum. So they are connected in this way, though. In the state of Maine, and not every state, but in the state of Maine, special education is defined as specialized instruction. In other states, it's defined as specialized instruction and or related services if the definition of those related services meet the definition of special education. Very confusing, but Maine limits its identification to the need for specialized instruction in special ed. Because they do that, I have to shift over to the 504 system and be creative with reasonable accommodations and related services through a 504 plan if that's what the student needs to access the general curriculum, which is a really complicated intersection. But that's about the only intersection, is what do we do when? So, and my opinion is, you gotta do something, and you gotta be flexible, and we have to be creative, because that's what we need to do for kids. So, it can be complex, but 504 will be another set of slides
Yeah.
that are a little easier. And on that one, I might bring in one of the 504 coordinators with me, so you don't have to listen to me talk all the time. So, any other questions?
I have a quick
Yep.
question. What is the, process or the timeline for evaluating the effectiveness of an IEP?
An IEP has to be reviewed at least annually,
Okay.
and actually every 364 days.
If it's been, say, 6 months and a parent says, I don't think we need these anymore, or a teacher, or does that ever happen and that
Yep, it does.
you can discharge
Yeah,
early?
No, you can.
Okay.
But, and my preference is that if we're going to discharge, we're going to reevaluate first,
Okay.
right?
But it may also be the opposite, Jen, where things aren't working and anybody can call, any member of the team
Team,
can call for
yeah.
review a program anytime.
Okay.
If they feel like this isn't working, if I'm a teacher and I have concerns, you know what, can I schedule a review program? And
Okay.
be able to do that. Or a
Yep.
parent can say, wait a second, I've got some concerns, this is, this accommodation isn't working the way we thought it would, can we meet? So we have that ability anytime.
Okay.
Minimum once a year, 3-year evaluation.
Minimum once a year, 3-year evaluation, program reviews whenever they're warranted. The special education staff knows that, I pride them and they have close relationships with their parents of students with disabilities. So a lot of those little nuances you can work out actually on paper without a meeting, if you agree.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to implementing an accommodation or, we don't need to have the whole team, right? We just
Right.
need to be on the same page.
Right.
So,
Okay.
the parent can call, they can call the building principal, they can call the special education case manager, they can call me, and we just direct a meeting to be set up. So, the more common thing, is that we do evaluations. The student doesn't qualify, their functional skills, meaning their report cards, their communication, all that stuff are here, and some members of the team would have a hard time understanding why they wouldn't qualify for that service anymore. But ultimately, it's because we want kids to be as independent as we can.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I've had conversations where folks, there is no small group in life. So we need to work towards this, as you know. And that's just, so we have, independent kids when they're adults.
I can speak to the fact that, and this has been a while, because one of my children was only in, 3rd grade at the time, I think, but we went through this entire process, and I remember being frustrated, right? Which is probably pretty common from a parent's point of view, and maybe we've even heard of some of that, where how does she not qualify? The teacher's saying this, I'm seeing this, and she's struggling. How come? But the 3 prongs really kind of explain
Yeah,
that.
that-
And then
that-
she ended up with a 504 accommodation plan for a couple of years, and then even kind of grew out of that. So, in fact, the special education team that I was so frustrated with at the time was correct in terms of giving her the space to grow the skills that she needed to be independent. So it's just funny how
Yeah,
you're
it's just-
talking about that exact situation.
It's just one of those situations where I want to help. That's my job, is to help. But sometimes that help doesn't feel like help, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying this isn't best for the kid, or
Mhm.
the team's saying this isn't best for the kid.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen too often.
So
but
here
it
are the
can-
big takeaways.
Yeah.
If there are questions that any of you get, or parents have questions, call the special education director, the special
Mhm.
services director.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
that's a really important part. There's this kind of, you saw it where it says if a teacher feels there's a concern, there's a process a teacher must go through prior to doing a referral.
Yep.
A parent doesn't have to go through that process, so that always creates miscommunication with families, because they're like, wait a second, it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't make any sense, it's just the rules. And so there are 2 different tracks that take place. One's a little bit faster than the other. I mean, the work is still going to get done, but the order of operations is slightly different. you know, if there are concerns about programming, there's always the opportunity to have the review of programming. So just always kind of keeping that in mind, and then, you know, the least restrictive environment, like, that's a really important concept, to be able to, you know, that's the conversation that goes on in those meetings. And so, when we have meetings, we want staff, if they have concerns, at the meetings, when you talk about it, it's not after the meeting saying, hey, look, I wish I would've said this. That's not what it, like, that's the time for that conversation. You're building the educational program for the child. So, just to kind of give you, it is a very complicated piece. It is a very emotional piece for
Yes, it
people.
is. Admittedly.
So there's some policies around that, and sometimes if you need someone to talk it through, start with the special education or special services departments.
Yeah.
And
Any
Mr.
other-
Caverly, in closing, if I might add, I don't want you to think, there's another route too, right? The route is, one of the building administrators has a concern about the safety of the kid, and then I can apply child find instead of that referral process. So there is a route. The one thing I wanted to leave you with is if you go to the RSU 35 website, and if you go to the menu on the right, it will say departments, and it will have the special services department. It will have the special services department tab. If you click on that, it's going to bring you to a generalized description of special education, McKinney-Vento and homeless education, English language learners, Section 504, and gifted and talented. It'll give you a general parent description there. But always, these are, you know, I was joking with John, I was like, these presentations are hard because I have a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree and then a certificate of advanced grad, and I don't know everything. And I've been doing it for 25 years. So if people ask you questions in the community, just point them to me.
And I just
and
think
we'll
it's
take care of
important,
their
like with the
concerns.
special services department, like, there's a term, and I know it came up in the springtime, but of twice gifted. So you can have a child who is receiving gifted services for a particular area and also receiving special education services.
Right.
So that is, I mean, so it all kind of goes back to that qualification piece of what that looks like and what the adverse effect looks like. So just, so there's some things that you say, oh, that's interesting, because you have this vision in your mind. And the other thing that comes up is that, like, when we talk about these reading remediation programs that we're talking about, it's really important to be clear at the elementary schools that all students are going to get reading education. Whether you're in special education or not, you're going to get that reading education. Special education services is going to be in addition to that in a lot of ways. And so, so it's that extra. So just think about, if I want a year's worth of growth, some kids it's going to take more than a year to get that year's worth of growth. And when the child gets behind, they not only have to make that year, but they're also have to make up for maybe another year. And so they have to have more than a year's worth of growth to be able to close that gap quicker. So that, like, that's all part of this conversation.
Yeah, and actually, what Mr. Caverly just did was give you a philosophical shift. It used to be different, right? We would take the kid and do something different, right? And we still do that, but now with the MTSS system, I'm not gonna give you, I'll just say, let's say, for example, you had 60 minutes of core reading instruction a day, and you're in Tier 2, now you have 60 minutes plus 30 minutes of core reading instruction, and then Tier 3 would be special education, you get the other time on top of that. Because what we know, it's more, right? It's not different, it's more. So how do we give more? And how do we make more enjoyable? Because usually it's in an area that kids struggle.
Right.
So thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you very much.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
It's so helpful.
That's great.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is just a Rollinsford workshop update. And so we have confirmation for the meeting time. I've been kind of drafting the agenda. I met with Superintendent Lane yesterday for a little while just to kind of create a draft agenda. And so some of the things that I had listed, just, you know, talking about the LEA services, how's that going, kind of the beginning of the year check-in, how is it going? Also discussing, we have some agreements right now that have been in place around Thursdays and also the late bus services, and so we can talk about all those types of agreements. And so if there's anything else that the board wants to add to that, let me know, we'll do that.
Okay. And just for the record, it's 10:17 at 4, actually, I was just looking at my calendar.
10:19?
I think we said 5:15 maybe, if I
I have 5:45
Five-
with F and F at 6:30, but,
think we did 5:30 with F and F at 6:30.
okay, 5:30 then.
But I'm gonna make sure, can I just double check that? I wanna make sure I
Yeah.
didn't reverse it, 'cause what I try to do is, if someone has to be here for the whole time, that's fine, but if someone has to
Yeah.
be here and then hang around for a
Right.
half hour, let's try to avoid that, so let me try to.
I
So
put it
maybe
in my
F and F
calendar
could
as
be F and F
5:30 as
first.
well.
Yeah.
I think it was 5:45 for just a 45-minute meeting with Rollinsford.
Yeah, and I'm almost positive that we want to do 5:30 for F and F.
Oh, F and
Um,
F
because we
first.
talked about that
and then
way-
switch it around.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
that way,
6:15.
everybody's going to be here for the 6
So
o'clock meeting.
6:15
So
for
I'll get some clarity.
6:15
I'm
for
sorry.
Rollins.
That
all right.
makes more sense, actually.
I'm just trying to be mindful of your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is,
No.
sorry, 19th.
19th.
19th, I said
Okay.
17th, excuse me.
6:15.
So I'm going to do my best to summarize 2 pages of a report relatively quickly. And so just kind of an update. Both our girls JV and varsity volleyball defeated Noble. And then they also won their homecoming game this past evening, Monday night, excuse me. The Marshall girls soccer had a big win versus Bonnie Eagle and Westbrook, and they continue kind of an undefeated streak, which is great. And they have a game tomorrow night versus Massapequa for their homecoming. Cross country had a great home meet, winning both the individual and team for both the boys and girls races. They also finished runners-up in the Southern Maine Classic this past weekend. The field hockey had a wonderful team had a wonderful victory versus Southport and Westbrook, beating them 4-1, and then had their homecoming game on Monday versus perennial powerhouse Traverse, which is a tough one to have as a homecoming event. So that was a tough one. They are the top rated team by far. Boys soccer has had a couple of big contests. They beat Westbrook recently, and then they had a really hard-fought loss versus Deering, but really a great playoff atmosphere. I had a chance to talk to Mr. Duchesne for a little while, and just it was a great game. Some really good soccer going on, and great chance for the kids to grow going into the postseason. Volleyball defeated Massabesic on Tuesday night with their best offensive performance yet. And then JV football played a game on Monday night, and then the varsity has a game, their homecoming game on Friday night.
Yeah.
Just so you know, we try to have every team play a home game during homecoming week.
Yeah.
That's the goal, and so that's why there's so many home contests. Extracurricular report, congratulations to the cast of Shrek the Musical, that's been decided. A little bit different dates, it typically is, in the past has been right around Veterans Day weekend, and so now it's gonna be the 1st, 2nd, 8th, and 9th of December, so just a little bit change in the dates. Hold is building some student leadership capacity experiences over the past year. I believe that they're taking a trip on Sunday as well. I think that's Hold that's going
It's on
away.
here, yeah.
Yeah, taking a trip to go whitewater rafting. Student government's been meeting, laying out some priorities.
Outdoor ed, I think.
Is that?
It's outdoor, I think it's the outdoor ed classes that are doing
The
the
trip?
rafting trip.
Yeah, okay.
No,
different
I
than-
think it's
Sorry.
Teens to Trails. That's all.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I know it's Mr. Patch who's going, but
Yes,
he's not driving the
yes.
bus, so I know that much. So, the Sustainability Club has been meeting again, which is great, and then the Interact Club met for the first time before school on met last week for the first time before school on Thursday. I'm going to read this as best I can. Homecoming week has begun. On Monday, the classes dressed in accordance with their assigned colors. Seniors were pink, juniors were orange, sophomores were green, and freshmen were yellow. Tuesday was Country Western Day, and today was
Outfits.
Groutfit gray outfits. And I had never heard that term before.
Groutfits,
All
yes.
right. Tomorrow is Decades Day, where students can pick any decade to dress in. Friday, of course, will be Purple and White Day. Over the past few days, students have been vying for Spirit Week points. Besides the dress-up day, classes are capable of attaining points through being in cans for a food drive, attending the dance, and decorating their advisory doors. On Friday, we will have our annual pep rally and compete in different games like blindfold dancing, tug of war, and musical spots. Tonight is a homecoming dance, and all proceeds will go to the senior class. Many students will be dressed in Hawaiian shirts and other tropical clothing as they want to fit the theme. Participation has been high, and the race is very close. All will come down to the pep rally victories and placements. Student involvement is gradually increasing, and the general feeling is positive and excited for what's to come in future months. Very cool. Let me get a check plus.
I know, she's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, that's great.
All right. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. We have had no correspondence to report on, so we'll move right to the report of the committees. Finance and Facilities met earlier this evening. I'll give a brief summary of the numbers, the finance piece of that, and Heather's going to give the update on facilities, transportation, and food service. So we have an update from Mr. Cormier on the months of July and August, which are slower revenue months than the rest of the months in the year. So revenue is running a little bit behind expenditures and budget. There's a bit of a concern around the timing of grant receivables from the state. We're keeping an eye on that, but we're running a bit behind on that. And as a result, our sort of actual cash balance is a little lower than we'd like it to be. Adult education expenditures and revenue, that's slightly in the black right now. School nutrition, We had some expenses from the summer nutrition program, so we're running a bit behind on that, but that, I guess we'll catch that up later. We're doing pretty well in terms of the general fund, at 82% of where, of our total budget. Typically should be at 83.3% for 2 months out of 10, but, or 2 months out of 12, I should say. But we had a 3 payroll month hit us, so that brought that number down a little bit. So in general, we're doing very well, keeping an eye on the receivables on the grants. Did I miss anything? No? Okay. Heather, go ahead,
So,
please.
in general, everything's going well over in the building side of things. So at the high school, the lighting is still being worked on. It's expected to finish up September 30th. Just a reminder for those that didn't listen in the last few meetings. All of the lighting is being switched to LED. There's some dimmers and some motion sensors being installed. So that will be finished up shortly. Marshwood Middle School, the water system is in. Yay, no PFAS detected, which is great for our kids, and it's going to be tested regularly. We do have some old tanks, holding tanks that basically hold water, so you can use water when we lose electricity. They aren't looking so great. So teams are looking into maybe exploring a generator option, or maybe eliminating the tanks altogether, because really there may not be a need for them any longer. So we'll see what happens with the old tanks. There are a couple of sinks or faucets that are still giving out small detections of lead in the district. Those 2 faucets have been updated with new fixtures and pipes, and they still are leaching lead. So they're going to explore another option with an extra filter, and if that doesn't work, those 2 sinks will be sunset and not usable. In terms of the tennis courts, ceiling needs to be done, or ceiling meaning ceiling sticking together, the cracks. The team is sending someone to be trained on how to actually seal tennis courts. So that will happen shortly, hopefully before the frost, so no further damage is caused. Recycling, as you know, the board is very much wanting to focus on sustainability, recycling, and just being good consumers, or not good consumers, what's the word? Responsible stewards. And we're realizing that there's a cost to be earth friendly. So again, the team here in the district is looking into the best use of our resources so that we can best support the environment around us. In terms of transportation, apparently there was a little bit of a snafu with the communication with the Sanford program and a bus being available or being canceled. However, the team here in the district has worked out a communication plan to better communicate to those Sanford programs about transportation, and that's all sorted. In terms of bus drivers, we still need bus drivers. So the team is working to create incentive options. Bus drivers can potentially make up to $31 per hour if they don't choose the insurance option. There's also discussion about perhaps a bonus or some sort of other incentive for folks who do referrals or stay on. So that's all being explored and possibly implemented shortly. So, if you're interested in being a driver, making a little extra dough, then definitely reach out to the bus transportation. Chartwells, again, the team isn't quite pleased with Chartwells, but don't worry. The team here at the district is on it and communicating regularly and providing supports to better enhance our contract and our services to our children. That's it.
Can I say one?
Sure, please.
There's no lack of clarity. Any fountain that has a lead issue, we do not use at all right now, just so
Yep.
that this everyone's clear,
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to be nervous about that. And so,
Yeah.
as Heather said, 100%, if we can't fix an issue with a particular faucet, then we would just discontinue use of it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Nice.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Ed Policy next meets next week, it looks like, September 28th, and Wellness and SEL on October 5th. So we'll look for updates after those meetings. Okay, that's the conclusion of the reports of the committees, and it brings us to the new business portion of our agenda. May I have a motion, please, to nominate Kyle Lontine?
I move we nominate Kyle Lontine, first-year probationary MHS school counselor, masters 77,394, prorated to start date school year 2022 to 2023.
I'll second, Kate.
Kate, thank you. John?
So I hate to say this, Heather, but Kyle was the director of University of New Hampshire, Upward Bound. And so he's going to be leaving the University of New Hampshire to join us. So their loss is certainly our gain. So we're really
So
excited to have
cool.
Kyle. She has her master's degree from the University of Southern Maine and then also attended the University of New Hampshire. Great deal of experience, truly student-centered. I mean, the Upward Bound component by itself is just an exciting opportunity for our students. Student-centered, energized. Former department chair at Somersworth High School, and also helped with the Career Technical Center piece, and so really just some great experience. And we're just so fortunate to have Kyle wanting to join our team. She's also a parent in our district, which is, we also have her children at the same time. So just a
Great.
very excited about the prospects.
Questions or comments? All in favor? 6-0, thank you. Motion, please, regarding this hold overnight trip.
Oh, I guess I got the dates wrong. So I move to consider an action to approve hold overnight trip with teens to Trails October rendezvous from Friday, October 21st to Sunday, October 23rd, 2022 at Camden Hills State Park for a maximum of 10 students with 2 chaperones, 2 district vans, cost per person $50 per person, equals $20 per person to teens to Trails plus $30 per student to pay for transportation and food for the weekend.
I'll second, Kate.
Thank you, Kate.
Sorry, I just have a cramp. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were going to demonstrate
No, I was
the
like,
Teens to Trails thing.
No, I'm not going to bounce. I was like, oh my God.
Are you okay?
Oh, I hate that.
Okay. Do you have anything to add around this?
That was a math problem.
I
know, it's a great
It's a
deal.
great opportunity.
Yeah.
okay.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it does sound great.
Fantastic.
Any comments or questions from the board? All in favor? We love this outdoor stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, we
6-0.
do. Yep.
And finally, and a motion with regard to a class size policy violation or two here.
I move to approve Marshwood High School exceeding the class size policy to accommodate AP Physics and AP Stats at 27 students each.
I approve, Heather.
You second.
That's a second, actually.
Yeah, second.
Okay, please.
So this is a difficult situation. 27 students enrolled in a class is probably like the worst number that you can have, because it's that threshold of if it's 30, you can run 2 sections and it's okay. 27, you really it becomes. Then we're violating the district policy on the other side because you could have two sections below that 14 kind of threshold. So this isn't ideal. Brett met with the teachers involved. Both teachers, want this to be kind of the solution for the short term. What we didn't want to do is say to one of the children, you can't take the class.
Exactly.
And so that's an unfortunate thing. So short term, I think we're okay. I don't think anybody's thrilled to have 27 students in a class. I don't think no one's upset about it, but it's not. It's something of a bigger issue we need to address. And the bigger issue going forward is we've got to look at our schedule. And so one of the things that when we schedule, we've got to start to understand, and Brett and I have met about this already, is that there's thresholds where we can't offer everything. And so there's going to be some tough decisions that we're going to have to make, and we might have to say, look, as a freshman, maybe you're going to take art fundamentals as a junior. And you can't take it as a freshman, or maybe you can take it as a sophomore. Or you can't take AP Physics this year, maybe you can take it next year. and trying to create that systematic way to do that. Our hope is to start the scheduling process a little bit earlier, so we can customize it around the budget. What's happened is that process has gotten late, and so we truly don't even have a sense of kind of the final numbers until mid-May. And at that point, we've already presented the budget, and so we're trying to move up that process a little bit to get the information. And we've really been working with our staff. They're extremely supportive. The other measure I just think is important to note is that during negotiations, our teachers were very gracious. But one of the concerns they shared with us is that by having so many students on the caseload, it becomes overwhelming. And so really kind of that number that we talked about was about 130 students is really kind of that threshold where we said, look, that for us is a number that makes us very nervous. And so we try to be very respectful of that. So both of these situations, the staff, even having the extra students in the class, are below that 130 threshold. That really kind of raises that level of concern. So just that was an important factor. If they weren't below that 130, I would not have brought this forward to you.
Yeah.
I think that's something that
Yeah.
we had an agreement that we
Okay.
want to be mindful of. So again, not ideal. I wouldn't have brought it to you if the staff said this isn't the best thing for kids. They were, obviously they would rather have smaller sections, no question. Like having a lab science is a little bit tricky with 27 students. There's no way around that. But they also didn't want to tell, who do you pick out of the class?
you can't.
You gotta-
Yeah.
And there is a chance that when you have 27, that maybe someone's going to drop during the drop period. That did not happen. And the other thing is that, when we set a schedule, you have to be able to put, thresholds in. And so typically the threshold that we've put in the past, we try to be that 23, 24 threshold, 22, 23, 24, depending on the class. Because if we have to add, we know we can add up to 26 without, having to come and have this discussion with the board. And that's always what our goal is. And so we've got to really look at that process. And so in our effort to try to accommodate students, sometimes you create situations such as this, which is just, this is kind of one of those tenets that we want to try to maintain. So it shouldn't happen again. I should say.
And the teachers
I shouldn't
are,
say that. We hope to avoid it ever happening again. I can't say that it will never happen again, but just at the same time, we do have a plan, and we did want to get buy-in from our staff beforehand. So
this is the first time in 4 years that I've been on the board that I've seen this come to board
It's not
approval.
common.
So I think that says a lot. And so long as the individual teachers involved feel like it's not going to be super overwhelming for them and it's manageable for the short term.
yeah,
That's fine.
fascinating 2 AP classes as well.
Yeah,
I
and that's
know.
what,
That was
That
fascinating.
is
to me.
it's
interesting.
like how important that is though for them,
Yeah.
you can't just cut one.
No.
No.
The last time I remember coming up was when we had an algebra section for 7th graders going back probably 10 years ago. And so I think we had a section of 28 then. And so that was the last time I can remember something coming to a board like this. So
There's enough room in the classroom. Like
labs,
just physical
labs,
space.
like physics is going to be tricky with
I was
the,
gonna say.
the labs. So they got to be creative around the labs. There's no question about that. Like it's not easy. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it. That hey, it's no problem.
Stats
There
is one thing,
there's some
but-
things we have to do, particularly around lab science, makes it difficult. And one of the things that we have to look at, and this is kind of above and beyond this topic, is that we have to look at physical spaces. For instance, in art classroom, do we have the art classroom in the right spot? If we're limited to X number of students because of the size of the classroom, is there a different place that we could put that to be able to create more space?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to limit opportunities just based on we put a classroom in a particular area. So is there a way that we can look at that? Those are all types of things I think as we start to dig into the schedule, we want to look at, because it does those things. The more restraints you put on the schedule, the more choices are taken away from people. And so so saying I can only have 15 people in a pottery class, that's the minimum of our class size policy. So all of a sudden that's 11 students who have kind of lost that opportunity based on a physical size. And it is what it is, don't misunderstand me, but at the same time, are there variables that we can control to be able to create some of the flexibility so we don't run into these situations as often?
It will be interesting to see too with the ELO program, if some of these students could take online college class.
Hear my
or-
conversation? Because this
No,
is exactly what we
that's so
talked
funny,
about.
But like some of these students,
Yeah.
a statistics
those are the
class, a college
alternatives
class, right,
Yeah.
might
that can
be a good
eliminate some of
alternative.
these
Right.
issues.
So there's another piece to this as well, that we are going to put some work into this year, is that right now, when a student wants to take a vocational program, they really have to use their electives, and they're still getting their requirements done through Marshall High School. And so we've got to do some work to be able to say, does firefighting meet any of our graduation requirements?
Right.
And so that a student can not only, get their electives taken care of, but maybe they can get half of a PE credit. I mean, that
Yeah.
might be a logical thing, and let's look
Right.
at the standards, and let's
Mhm.
have that conversation. Is there a math credit that someone could get during a building trades? I don't know, but I think those are the conversations we want to start to have.
True.
Because that's going to really drive the schedule, because a lot of times these, kids who are taking voc, first of all, they have to make a really tough decision, because if they take vocational classes, it puts a lot of pressure on them. Because all of a sudden, they're trying to manage a lot of different moving parts right now. So if we can help them by eliminating some of those requisites that they're going to get covered through SRTC, let's do that. So I've had a conversation with Kathy Gunst. Sorry, Kathy Sargent, sorry, different Kathy. And so we'll begin that work this year, but that will make a big difference, I think, down the road as far as scheduling for those students. And more importantly, it's going to open up the SRTC to more students, because some students can't do it because they can't graduate and fit everything in, and that's not necessarily the message that we want right now.
Right.
So,
That's exciting.
anyway, I know we went off on a tangent, but that's the ELO and then the SRTC requirement piece.
Yeah, that's good.
Is the cap for classes normally 26? Is that?
It depends on the grade level. So for high school, middle school, it's, what it says is from I think the middle school actually is 18 to 25. High school is 15 to 25. But there's a caveat that says you can go one above or one below without bringing it to the board. And so with the 27, we had to bring it to the board. Now, that doesn't include PE, doesn't necessarily have to abide by that. Course doesn't have to abide. So any of the performance-based classes, and that's got nothing to do with the content, but it's got to do with the class structure. So if Chris Bisson has 42 students in her course at the middle school, she would say, give me 45 because I can have another alto, or I can have another, whatever. PE, it's a little bit different number. We might be able to accommodate 27 in a PE class, whereas in an art class, we couldn't have 26. We have to kind of create a secondary number to say, we can only fit X number of students in order to maintain the integrity of the course. So.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful too for if all kids were aware of the other options, like the community college, how many kids of these 27 students were presented with alternative options, and were their parents talked to, because maybe the parents are helping outline the course schedule. Who knows who's selecting? So, but if the school counselors came in and presented these other alternatives, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But again, I think it's wonderful that so many kids are so interested in physics. Now, I'm not saying they should go to community college.
Brett and I had a conversation with Heidi and Kim yesterday where we said, let's just say one of the controversial things that we deal with is AP, taking the AP class. So do we require students to take the AP class and take the AP test? We always had, and that changed about 3 years ago. And so part of me understands there's an equitability issue, right? And so that some people, that's an $80 check that you've got to write for every AP class you're taking. That could be a $400 check that we're asking people to come up with. So do we have to think about a strategy around that? But if you're going to take an AP class and not take the AP exam, why not take a class at York County Community College and get 3 college credits for it at the same time if you're not taking it?
Yes.
So this was the exact conversation we had yesterday.
Yes, because if they don't know about it, they won't try it.
So we're
They're not
working on
encouraged
those.
to.
Exactly.
And it can't come from mom.
Exactly.
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that,
I
right?
did have, maybe I didn't mention it, but I did have the ELO kind of an update. Did they not?
I did see that on there.
Oh, yeah. On the 26th, ELO opportunities update.
Oh, yeah.
That's not only, that was not just the busing, that was also going to have the presentation of where we are with that, the committee's meeting and doing some work already.
Yeah. Good.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
know we went off a tangent.
No, that's
quite all right.
That's an important conversation for other people to hear, because they may be one of the kids in the 27.
Right.
Is there any chance that a couple of the kids in the stats class would want to switch to physics or vice versa? Or are they taking
probably
both?
don't
Probably
know.
the same kids.
Same kids?
Some of them are the
Yeah.
same kids. I mean, that's,
Okay.
I mean, I'll give you my own experience. When Matthew was a senior or junior, he had to take physics online, AP physics online, because it didn't fit into his schedule. You know what I mean? It's physics is one of those tricky ones. And one of the good things is the new schedule has a little bit more flexibility in it, where it used to be kind of that 7-period day. Now it's kind of the 2 back-to-back 4-period day, then the B day with 4 other periods. So open up another slot for kids, and so that's taking some pressure off. So, but that's why when we talked about adding the science position last year,
Yeah.
we were not talking about the upper level classes, because what we're
Okay.
doing is those kids already have a lot of choices, and I'm not saying we couldn't have more, but more might be something that we need to think about differently, as opposed to, let's talk about the kids in the middle who might benefit from a geology class, who might
Yes.
benefit from an astronomy class, and so the science
Yes.
department will be working over that over the course of the year, because, you know, I know you're aware, but at one point there was talk about AP Chem doing that, or AP Physics, it was AP Chem or AP Physics 2, and so like, you're competing with the same kids, and so
Right.
like that's when you start to, you know, there's
Yeah.
only a certain number of students who are doing that, so
Right.
I'm just trying to be mindful of that as you go forward.
Yep.
Do we have marine biology anymore? Now? Do we
We
have-
do, right?
We have
It was-
marine biology still?
I think we
That
have
was
the
my
original-
favorite class
I
in
think we
high
have the
school.
original instructor back also, I think that was.
It was like
he's
so,
not teaching it, but
so
yeah.
specific. It was
Yeah.
such a great, what a great class with field
Yeah.
trips to the actual deal and.
Oh, wow.
look,
Field
we
trips.
made,
Used to go to the.
we
to-
made,
to the beach.
what do you make?
time you-
Pudding out of the carrageenan from the seaweed and like the whole, it was just a great class. It was
Yep.
fascinating.
That's cool.
Any other comments or questions on this open motion?
Yeah.
Well-
Oh,
Or shall we
John gets
move
to
to
check.
a
Right,
vote?
right, right,
I
right.
didn't forget
Yeah.
that we had an open motion. Shall we move to a vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Yes, yeah.
That is 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thanks for everybody.
Okay, last thing on our agenda is our building administrators check-in. We have high school and middle school.
Yeah.
Mr. Hoogterp's going to go first, it looks like.
I was gonna say, you still have a motion on the table. It's been a great week here. It's been a busy time at the high school. I appreciate the girls' report of everything that's going on. I was told I did a terrible job of dressing for Country Western Day yesterday, because I don't have anything. But I made an attempt at outfit, but we'll see. No, things are really busy. It's been an exciting week. We've had some things that we haven't been able to do for a few years take place this week, and we've added some new things that kids have wanted that we're excited about. The biggest one is we're going to have like an outside cookout kind of thing before the pep rally on Friday. So we'll go through a 4-period abbreviated morning, and then kids will go outside to eat, and then have all the games and all the activities to that. So it's been a great week so far. Like I said, it's a busy time. We've got next week we've got a career and college fair on Tuesday from 4 to 6. We've got over 60 different colleges and employers and military coming in the gymnasium from 4 to 6 to give kids the information they need. And it's open to all grade levels. At the end of that, we have a financial aid night where parents can be walked through the FAFSA process and the things that they need to do with that. After that, once we hit October, again, stays busy. We've got the NUIAs the first week, we've got the PSATs the week after that, and then we kick in with parent-teacher conferences. So it's definitely a busy time at the high school as we go through this fall season. So, any questions you might have?
Are you going to the dance after this?
Yes.
Okay.
I will not dance, though.
I
I'm
heard you
probably
waving
like
the electric
Elaine from
slide.
Seinfeld. No one wants to see it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Ms. Screech.
Good evening. As always, thanks for the opportunity to share with you some of the things we're doing at the middle school. I want to highlight, I shared with you the last time we were here that we have an advisory program, and I gave you the kind of the general outline of what happens, and my team leaders and I thought it'd be helpful for you to get a deeper dive into 2 parts of our advisory program. So as I mentioned, we have one day that's academic counseling. We have a day that's team and grade level, but we have two days of the week. One's called our social emotional learning. It's led by our school counselors, Sarah Camp and Kathleen Ring. And so what we've done is we've created an SEL calendar for our advisors to be able to follow throughout the school year. And we've actually been using our faculty meetings instead of sit and get, where they have to sit and listen to me, go over all these things that I can easily disseminate through an email or through a team leader meeting. We now have our staff engaged in some of the activities that they're going to be leading their students in during advisory. So we've been broken out into the community circles, which you've all probably heard of. And in these community circles, our Sarah Camp, Kathleen Ring, and Katie Gilpatrick are actually having other staff members volunteer to demonstrate how these circles, these community circles, can look with prompts and games and lesson plans. And then the following week, the following time we met, we actually had the whole staff engaged. It's the first time I've seen this type of engagement from my staff in this capacity. And so I saw people who were a little hesitant and lacked a little bit of confidence in leading these circles, all of a sudden embrace it because they had a chance to practice it. They had a lot of fun. And so when I walk around the building in the morning during advisory, every single one of our advisors are engaged in these activities. And we think it's going to make a huge difference. So that's our social emotional learning piece. And then our school-based activity, I shared with you how we'll have some kind of theme each month. So you might know that this is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And so the theme we have is to, I had the privilege 8 or 9 years ago to go to an MPA conference and meet Julia Hansen and her mother. They spoke, and Julia started what's called the Yellow Tulip Project, if you've ever heard of that. You know, and the theme of the Yellow Tulip Project is to smash the stigma around mental health, but also to build community and remind people that there's help and hope. So our school counselors have embraced the Yellow Tulip Project, so has our student council. And so on Friday, which is our school-based activity day, we're first going to have an advisory activity where they're going to sit and talk about things that are hopeful for them. And it's going to be an activity where they're going to take yellow tulips, and each student is going to write something that gives them hope. And then we have 2 bulletin boards outside the cafeteria, just inside the lobby area, where they're going to demonstrate, but they're going to put all of these different things up on the bulletin board. And I've seen this in other schools I've been in, and it's very powerful. You see students and staff stop and start to read and see how there is a sense of community and how a lot of them have things in common. So those are 2 Fridays back to back. One will be the activity and the advisory, and the other one will be actually going out, putting these up and having those conversations. So I share this with you because I think these are very powerful activities that our students are now going to be engaged in, and our staff has absolutely embraced it. And so October, we're going to transition into, you all know that we have the Veterans Day celebration. It's the first Friday in November, which will be November 4th this year. We'll spend all of our Fridays in advisories with each grade level and team working on whatever their focus is going to be during that day. So we don't have to take time out of classes, and it'll be a school-based activity. So just an example of 2 of the days of the 4 on what we're doing in advisory, and I think you can all see all the benefits, not just to the work that's being accomplished, but the sense of community and the team building and the opportunity for staff to make a connection with their advisors. So wanted to highlight those for you. And if anybody has any questions on those programs, I'd love to answer them for you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Good
Thank
stuff.
you.
Wonderful.
Okay, any last thoughts from any of the board members?
There is a little announcement for a workshop in here, online, looks like, a virtual Zoom meeting that Drummond Whipsum is offering. I just thought I'd bring it up because it was in our packet.
Okay.
So the plan would be that we can do something here together. We'll watch it together if anybody who wants to come. And then what we'll do is we'll put it on the next board agenda as a workshop. Since that would be open.
Great. Anything else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn the meeting tonight.
I'll second.
Kate, all in favor?